So when we got that Instagram announcement for Avatar 7 Havens, it tells us a few things. One, the nations as we know them are gone. In their place are 7 havens which the vestiges of humanity had to deal with both spirit monsters and each other. And according to a Variety article, it says this series, will consist of 26 episodes split between books 1 and 2. This raises some concern for me, as the original Avatar The Last Airbender was 61 episodes spread across 3 seasons. There are a few things you can do in a 61-episode cartoon with one goal, essentially. You can have plot-heavy episodes where we need to introduce characters or skills. You can have lore-heavy episodes that introduce the background and the mechanics of this world. You can have episodes where the characters just screw around and just interact with each other. In a 61-episode cartoon, you can have these 3 types of things. Well, I shouldn't say 61-episode cartoon. Rather, I should say an episodic cartoon. The Legend of Korra, while not 61 episodes, got 52 episodes to tell its story. There is often this knee-jerk reaction to a specific subset of fans when it comes to the idea of an episodic cartoon or episodic show in general, because in their minds it jumps to either filler hell or just plain immaturity like SpongeBob. That's not the case. It's just a different structure to the story. Arcs don't need to be back to back to back. It's actually one of my biggest criticisms of My Hero Academia on that front. When you have very heavily serialized storyline, you can lose the scope and scale of things that make this world feel lived in. I'm one of those crazy people who believes the school festival arc of My Hero Academia was not a big waste of time, and in fact that we needed way more of those in order to have more focus around the characters and make this world feel like a world and not just the perspective of a few people. When it comes to episodic or semi-serialized episodic series in general, I feel like Super Sentai, which has a 50-episode structure, is actually a pretty good model in order to see how you can develop multiple things at once. You not only have a main story, you have the characters get developed on good seasons, you have conflicts and relationships, you can have lore. This can be done very well or very poorly depending on the season, but it can be done. On the spectrum of serialized and episodic, the original Avatar The Last Airbender was serialized, however, it leaned on the episodic end in order to develop its world, its characters, and generally just a feel for everything. In contrast, The Legend of Korra also had those episodic moments, but it clearly leaned way more into the serialization. It had 4 story arcs that had its own subplots, and spread around 52 episodes. I feel like the more serialized end of things did hamper the storytelling of the series overall. You can't help but have this feeling that The Legend of Korra is tied up in its own serialization. Yes, we had subplots, I'm not saying we didn't, but the overall feel of The Legend of Korra is much more like a bottle show, even though we're not staying in one place. There's a lot of, not exploring. See, the original Avatar, you had this sense of exploration since they were traveling the planets. But even in The Legend of Korra, when they are exploring, it doesn't feel like they are exploring a lot. Let me explain. The sense of exploration is not there. You have episodes in The Legend of Korra like the original Airbenders. When it does this more Avatar The Last Airbender-esque plot, the audience is actually groaning. Why? Because the pacing of the arc suddenly stops and takes a detour. There's also the nature of the serialization of The Legend of Korra, which does it no favors when it comes to episodes like the original Airbenders. See, The Legend of Korra is not only serialized, but it's serialized into 4 distinct storylines, each succeeding the other. So, 52 episodes divided into 4, each story arc, is around 12 to 14 episodes. You can see the problem here. In a 61-episode show like Avatar The Last Airbender that has a very decentralized focus, it has a direction but no strong structured arc which works out to its favor, it can mess up on one episode and not much in the way of problems will happen. Yes, it may never be referenced again, or may be referenced again and frustrate you, but that's like a paper cut in the grand scheme of things. When it comes to The Legend of Korra, where the focus is tight and the structure has to be tight in order to get these arcs out of the way, a bad episode can do a lot of harm. For a 12-episode storyline, if you have one episode that's a dud, you've essentially lost 8% of the entire season to a dud. When Avatar The Last Airbender has a dud, it's only like 1% of the whole show, and it's a continuous storyline. But even if we try to break it down by seasons, 1 out of 20 is like 5%. It can do a lot less harm than 1 out of 12. And again, in an episodic storyline, you can skip the episode, the damage is relatively self-contained. In a serialized storyline that has to be packed into 12 to 14 episodes, you're basically going to screw yourself over because you're going to have to end up sacrificing time you could be using to develop these characters or their motivations or other things that revolve around them, like the lore behind them, and you're just going to frustrate your audience with what could have been. Before her shocking demise, could you have gotten more out of Minghua, more interactions, more backstory, any backstory at all? Before his earth-shattering demise, could you have gotten anything more out of Ghazan, more character development, more interactions? And before Poli's mind-blowing execution, I think we got the point here. The point here is that when you have a very tight serialized story, you're going to need to make every minute count, and every minute you waste tends to be a bit of an issue. It's why I don't like a good deal of the Pokemon movies. There's a level of redundancy in some of them that make me cringe. You guys only have like 90 minutes to tell your story. You need to make every minute count. And because it's 90 minutes long, you have to tell a very tight story. I was talking about Avatar, right? Oh yeah, I was. So, what does Seven Havens have to do? Well, it needs to have a main character with a main conflict, probably something Avatar related. You need to have character development not only for the main character, well, you could not have character development for the main character, it depends on what type of story you're writing in general, but you might want to have a supporting cast that is actually developed. Like, I don't know, your antagonists. You need to develop the Seven Havens, what their look, what their feel is there any intrigue in them? And you need to have Avatar lore and history, because we need more of those, because this is an Avatar franchise. Why wouldn't you not develop the lore of the series? Now, there's an argument to be made that some of those elements can simply be merged together, and that Avatar The Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra did a lot of heavy lifting for the lore and setting, to which I say, to some extent I do agree with you, but I have to say that the past is a different country, and the future is also a different country. Every single time you do a sequel series that takes place after a time skip, you need to reinvent the setting generally, mainly because the setting has changed. You are standing in essentially a new country. So, yeah, there's that issue you have to deal with. So, my problem is that you have only 26 episodes and 7 havens. Some of them are going to get the short end of the stick, I'll tell you that. Because we fell in love with various locations with just Aang and friends just running into them in the original Avatar The Last Airbender. For The Legend of Korra, we really could not see something more than just the setting, as in just treat it like the setting, when it came to Zaofu or Republic City. Mainly because we had another storyline to contend with. So that's sort of my fear. Ba Sing Se in the original series was like 5 or 6 episodes, correct me if I'm wrong, and it felt interesting enough to be a city of walls and secrets. It had its own themes, its own vibes to it, and its own structure. I don't think we can do that with the Seven Havens in the time we have. In the storyline, they probably also want to tell you. So it's going to probably feel a lot more like The Legend of Korra in terms of locale, rather than just personality of a world that was Avatar The Last Airbender. And that does make sense. This is the sequel series to The Legend of Korra after all, but it feels disappointing. I don't know, maybe I'm overanalyzing the whole situation and everything will be fine and this will be the best avatars than the original or the Kyoshi novels, but those are just my thoughts. Please consider liking, subscribing, tipping the channel on Ko-fi. This is Cyril signing off.